Hi, hello. VinnyEndDragon here, and welcome to another video. Today, we're going to be discussing villains, the true pinnacle of evil in the Pokemon franchise. Truly, you aren't someone to be taken seriously unless you have an evil team. And evil team leaders are the backbone of the plots of most Pokemon games. And today, I wanted to celebrate those plots by discussing in detail which evil team leader across all of the various generations of Pokemon has the most crimes. But first, we gotta set off some ground rules first, as I feel like the interpretation of these crimes could be just thrown around and up to chance. First things first, I'm only really using modern law and mostly American, but some international. I know that a lot of these games take place in Japan or other parts around the world, but just for the sake of simplicity and me not studying a bunch of different legal codes, I wanted to make sure that this was just the most simple as possible. Number two, I am not a lawyer. This was just the most basic information I could find on the internet. I do not have a law degree, and if someone wants to hypercorrect my video with more proper sentences with, actual legal experience, they could be my guest. And third, I'm not really discussing morality in this video. Some of these people are more evil than others in terms of their actual actions and goals. However, I'm really only looking at it from the eyes of the law. What would a judge who looks at this list of crimes give them? With that selected and our list of characters, let's get straight into it. First up, we're starting with Giovanni, the big bad boss. Now, Giovanni is a mob boss and has a lot of crimes to be counted of the sort. However, I actually want to start off with a bit of his lesser crimes, and that would be his treatment of Mewtwo. You see, throughout this video, I'm going to be referring to Pokemon as animals because, well, in the real world, we don't have Pokemon. So, for his treatment of Mewtwo, I'm just gonna give him animal abuse. I feel like any real court would just look at how he treated Mewtwo, and if it was just any other dog, they would say, yeah, no, that's a case of animal abuse for sure. And the animal abuse of Mewtwo would net him 180 days in jail. However, Mewtwo isn't just any normal animal, it's one that was created through genetic experimentation of another one. Now, unfortunately, there is real-world precedent for unethical experimentation of embryos, which was a sad thing I had to look up. But even for the creation of Mewtwo, Giovanni would be netted another 3 years in jail. However, with the Mewtwo stuff aside, you'd think Giovanni probably would be clean, right? Well, no, obviously. Next up, Giovanni would be netted another 4 years in prison. At the time of Gold and Silver, Silver is definitely a child, and this would classify as child abandonment. I mean, he completely left him. For the child abandonment of Silver, his biological son, he would absolutely receive 4 years in prison. Next up is his plot to seize the Master Ball from Silphco. First of all, there's an unlawful kidnapping of every single Silphco employee, which would net him 11 years in prison as well as $20,000 in fines. And there's the grand larceny of the Master Ball itself. I mean, just stealing that, which is a one-of-a-kind item, which is definitely experimental technology that Silphco's been developing, which is a very powerful and well-regarded company across the region. I think this would count as grand larceny. Next up, there's the very idea of Team Rocket as an organized crime group, which is just organized crime, or racketeering if you want to be specific, which would net Giovanni as the leader of said group 20 years in jail. However, that's not where it ends with Giovanni's mob ties, as he also has money laundering and tax evasion to slap onto his list. After all, he has an illegal game corner which is a front to his evil organization, and I guarantee you he's not paying proper taxes on that. Overall, that whole illegal game corner scam would net Giovanni another 20 years in prison and a $500,000 fine. And finally, although every team leader battles the protagonist of the said games, Giovanni's is pretty clear that it's attempted murder specifically of Red. Attempted murder, like in the case of Giovanni, would absolutely net him life in jail, as absolutely you can't do that. Wow, I can't believe I was just about to say murder is bad. Overall, Giovanni netted himself a pretty hefty amount of crimes for the beginning of this list. Giovanni's final tally comes out to 1 life sentence, 78 years in jail, 180 days in jail, and $520,000 in fines. Next up is the most boring character that I talk about today. Archer may be boring, but he's got around the similar crime level as his boss. After all, you have organized crime / racketeering for the continuation of Team Rocket, which is about 20 years in jail, and then the money laundering and tax evasion himself, which is 20 years and then another $500,000 in fines. Archer, like his boss before him, actually gets an unlawful kidnapping charge as well, as he kidnaps the people of the radio tower, which gives him another 11 years in prison and $20,000 in fines. And then finally, we have an act of terror, as the taking over the radio tower and corrupting people's radio waves and overall just messing with their radios. I mean, I know that we don't use radios, but back then everyone had one, so I'd consider it an act of terror to be messing with that sort of stuff. It's just not really a good look for Archer here. An act of terror like that one would definitely get you a life sentence. Overall, the final tally for Giovanni's second in command is actually just a little bit less than his. A life sentence, 51 years in jail, and $520,000. Pretty much Giovanni's without the Mewtwo stuff. Finally, we're into Gen 3, and already we're getting ridiculous. Let's start off with some of the basic stuff. Maxie would absolutely get a charge for stealing the meteorite from the government. When a meteorite just lands in a country, you can't really just mine it yourself and do whatever the hell you want with it. I mean, you'd absolutely get problems for that. And Maxie, I feel like, would be issued a $100,000 fine. Next up, Maxie gets Grand Theft Auto, as under Team Magma's orders, they steal a submarine, which, not technically a car, but I don't really know if there's Grand Theft submarine, so we're just gonna go with that. And then finally, like Giovanni, he also has grand larceny for a different charge, this time stealing the various orbs depending on the game. Archie does this too when we get to him, red or blue orb, and then in Emerald it's different. Just know that he gets 20 years in jail for this. Now, overall, this means that Maxie should be below Giovanni, right? Well, there is one or two little things I have left to discuss. So Maxie would absolutely be given a charge for acts of terror. With the usage of the blue orb, Maxie almost completely destroys the entire planet. This would absolutely be considered an act of terror. I mean, he utilized Groudon in such a way that would make pretty much every single Hoenn resident and even people around the world panic. Just overall not something that I feel like any court would let him get away with without getting life in jail without parole. And then finally, his last charge being eco-terrorism. Now, there's various different degrees of eco-terrorism. I mean, technically you could be considered an eco-terrorist for starting a forest fire. However, Maxie's is absolutely way more severe, as it's an eco-terrorist action that results in definitely the death of some humans, as well as just overall the damaging of our oceans. Maxie would sadly get the death penalty for this. If you were Maxie's lawyer, you could maybe argue that Maxie had no control of Groudon after he activated it, and that part of it was also Kyogre. Maybe drop the act of terror charge. However, Maxie knew that something like this would happen had he awakened Groudon, and if he had access to be able to completely control Groudon, it's pretty unclear with his intent and the intent of Team Magma that similar stuff would happen. Overall, that leaves Maxie with a final tally of 1 death sentence, a life sentence, 23 years in jail, and a $100,000 fine. Now, I sure hope he isn't immediately shown up by his brother or anything. Now, off the bat, let's get rid of every single terrorist charge that Archie has that Maxie also has. Let's start with Grand Larceny and Grand Theft Auto, both of which being 23 years in jail, which both Maxie and Archie have, so we're just going to slap that on the Archies as well. Next up, we have what I previously discussed, the acts of terror and eco-terrorism. I mean, Kyogre's is arguably even worse, but we'll get into that later. Definitely, people were all over the place freaking out. Kyogre was completely submerging cities. I mean, it's not even close. And you could, again, try to argue that maybe Archie didn't really have any control of Kyogre, but he still summoned it, he stole the orb, he has the intent. Any jury would just look at this and be like, yeah, okay, this guy tried to destroy the entire planet. However, I do have 3 specific charges that are Archie specific, not to be had with Maxie. While Maxie's evil team is an evil team, most of it is above board or not really stuff he does. However, Archie himself has acts of piracy. Piracy can net you 5 years in jail. Team Aqua is absolutely a pirate group. I mean, they wear pirate outfits, they're inspired by pirates, they even call themselves pirates. I mean, it's pretty simple. And unlike Maxie, who chose to have his evil base inside of a dormant volcano where nobody was really around, Archie chose to have his underwater secret base. How cool! Except that's massively illegal. Having an illegal, unregulated, ungoverned underwater base can net you massive problems. From what I found online, Archie could be fined $5,000 per day of business. And look at this concept art. There is no way that Archie built this in less than a year. Keep in mind that the events of Gen 3 probably happened over the course of several months, and this took probably years to develop, and Team Aqua's already been an established thing for a long time. Overall, I'm gonna say that being generous, Archie had this thing 5 years ago. That would net Archie a fine of $9,125,000. Yeah, there is no amount of booty that Archie could plunder with all of his pirate gang folks that could help him pay for that. Not to mention, having an underwater base in and of itself is probably expensive. How did he even build that? There is absolutely no explanation in game. He just has the cool evil base. He's had it for years probably. I mean, sure, it was probably easier to build with Pokemon, but even still, how did you even get down there? Overall, just next time, please use an empty ship or something. This is way too expensive. And then finally, even though I already discussed eco-terrorism involving death with Kyogre, Kyogre also nets one more charge to Archie, and that's attempted genocide. Now, again, you could argue that Kyogre wasn't exactly in his control when this happened. However, if you look at his plans with Team Aqua, you could see premeditation, plus he's the one who awoken Kyogre with the orb. I think this falls on him. And flooding the entire planet, the place where we live on solid land, would absolutely net attempted genocide, which would be a life sentence in jail for our buddy Archie. Overall, that actually puts Archie in the lead. Let's tally it up. Archie has 1 death penalty, 2 life sentences, 28 years in jail, and a $9 million fine. Wow. As much as I hate Gen 3, I mean, you can't really argue with Archie's results. That man knows how to lose money. But, you know, it's fine. I'm sure we won't really get a depressed nihilist after him who breaks this even more. Cyrus. Where do I even begin? Cyrus was the first evil team leader where I just straight up do not have real-world crimes to describe things he did. Sorry, but becoming God isn't exactly in the US legal code. I'm really confused as to why it isn't. Maybe I'll have to take it up with the Supreme Court one day and argue whether or not becoming a god is illegal. I mean, you know, I'm sure that we'll let that precedent happen when it happens. Anyway, let's get into the crimes I can charge for our buddy Cyrus. Now, as the leader of Team Galactic, we first have to talk about him stealing energy from the Valley Windworks. I would consider this as grand larceny, as he's stealing a bunch of energy from a power plant. I wouldn't exactly really know to what degree, but I decided to give him 20 years in prison for this as just the maximum sentence. He stole it by force and from a power plant, which would probably destroy them financially. Overall, not exactly a great look for Cyrus already. Team Galactic stealing energy from power plants is crazy to think about. However, that's not even really the worst part, as you have the destruction of property in Celestic Town. Even before the bombs go off, I mean, they're already just wrecking shop. Team Galactic is just taking over the town, assaulting people. Just not a great look for him, and I'd throw him in jail for a year for that. However, that 1 year is going to be absolutely pennies to the life sentence he gets for attempted mass murder. That's right, we gotta talk about galactic bombs, which ownership of even said explosives would net you 20 years in jail. However, attempting to use them to blow up a town would be an absolute life sentence. You cannot blow up a town with self-made explosives? Are you serious, dog? This is a kid's game. However, he is unsuccessful in his attempts to blow up Celestic Town. What he isn't unsuccessful with is his attempts to blow up Lake Verity, which is a lake, which, yes, you heard that right, that's more eco-terrorism. Lake Verity I would absolutely consider as more of a national park. I mean, it houses a legendary and it's just a giant pool of water, and to blow it up would absolutely destroy the ecosystem there. And there was definitely people living somewhere around there. That's eco-terrorism resulting in death. That's a death penalty. I mean, you can't do that, dude. Put the galactic bombs away. Now, with only one death sentence and one life sentence, you think Cyrus would be pretty underwhelming for his delusions of grandeur. Well, we have to talk about the summoning of Giratina. In the words of Cyrus himself, he would attempt to use Giratina to recreate the world, a world with no pain, a world with no spirit. This has been interpreted as restarting the universe. Now, I'm not too familiar with the laws on Mars or other planets. I'm sure that there are other planets with life out there somewhere, but let's just assume that he's talking about Earth. This means that Cyrus has 8 billion attempted murder charges. This would place Cyrus during this action as an attempted omnicide. Cyrus would have attempted to kill literally every single other living being in the entire universe except for him. Yeah. Jury, that's a death penalty, right? We can all confirm. Even though no one's tried to do that in real life, I'm just gonna call it. And with that, our little nihilistic loser gets 2 death penalties, 1 life sentence, and 41 years in jail. No fines, though. Congratulations for him. He gets to keep all his money when he dies in jail for summoning a demon. N. Probably my favorite villain, but one that actually has a true pure heart. After all, N only wanted what's best for the region, and he truly believed that he was doing the right thing. However, that doesn't really matter in the eyes of the law. N sadly does have multiple charges, which means you're not going to be seeing your favorite evil boy for a long time. Under N's orders as the king of Team Plasma, there was multiple animal kidnappings going on. The stealing of Pokemon I would absolutely classify as dog napping, which would net you around 10 years in prison. Next up, stealing museum artifacts is also something you can't do, and considering that it's a museum, I'd classify that as grand larceny. I mean, these are national artifacts here, you can't do that. That's another 20 years in jail. Overall, 30 years in jail, not that bad for N. You'll get to see him in a couple decades. Maybe he'll be a little bit taller and his green hair will be even longer. Except I didn't talk about N's last charge. I'm not even gonna describe this one, I'm just gonna roll the clip in post. Despite that cutscene, there are only really 5 people in the League building that are accounted for and alive afterwards, which means that no one really died during this. However, this was absolutely staging a violent coup. N just completely established himself as the king of Unova and didn't even really go through the proper gym challenge in order to become the champion. He just defeated anyone who stood in his way with the power of his legendary Pokemon. Pokemon politics are a bit weird. Is the champion really the leader of the region? Who knows, but I'd like to say so, which means that this is a violent coup. He did not appeal the proper Pokemon League rules to becoming the proper champion of the region. Now, staging a violent coup depends on the country, however, even in America, it's still a death penalty. He even had the audacity to put his castle where the capital is. I mean, just absolutely ridiculous. I wish I could do that, honestly, and you inspire me. Maybe I'll just plop my little castle right next to the White House. Anyway, at the end of Black and White, N turns good, which means he only really ends up with 1 death penalty and 30 years in jail. Not that bad for a little guy. And with that, the video should be over, right? I mean, I just did Gen 5, and Gen 6 through 9 are gonna be their own video. So, who's really left? I don't know, but we'll see when we get to Gen 6. Oh, wait, hang on. No, my script says there's 1 more villain left. Well, okay, if it's like a minor antagonist for a different generation, I'm sure that's fine. Who the hell is Ghetsis? Oh my god. Let's discuss all of Ghetsis' trials and tribulations in order, shall we? First of all, he has literally every single count N has during his tenure. I mean, overthrowing the government? Check. Animal kidnapping? Check. Grand larceny? Check. However, I'm actually going to tack on animal abuse for Ghetsis, as he treats the Pokemon he kidnaps far worse than N ever did. N, under his orders, treated the Pokemon with care, and he always told Team Plasma to treat the Pokemon they stole with respect. After all, he said they were freeing them. Ghetsis had no such love for these Pokemon. Not to mention, I'm going to give Ghetsis a second animal abuse charge for Genesect. While Genesect is a brought-back-to-life creature, which is another unethical experimentation charge, 3 years in jail, by the way, it is an animal, so I'm going to say that's animal abuse for sure. Next up are all the child-related charges, because Ghetsis and CPS are just not friends. They would never be friends. Oh my god. And Ghetsis even lives in the region with CPS. Unova is America. So, for the treatment of N, I'm knocking on child abandonment, child endangerment, and child abuse. All 3. Ghetsis would leave his adoptive son N to be raised by Team Plasma admins for multiple years or months at a time, just without care, and he endangered him by letting him be the leader of Team Plasma, and he abused him because, I mean, look at him. There was so much emotional and mental abuse that Ghetsis did to N that I'm just gonna label it as child abuse. However, you could even go in depth for that. All these child-related charges would knock Ghetsis for 4 years in prison, 8 years in prison, 6 years in prison, and then $25,000 worth in fines. Well, okay, that's all stuff he did in Black and White. I mean, the child stuff means he gets a little bit of an edge above N, but, I mean, Archie's still definitely in the lead, right? What is Ghetsis gonna do to compete with that? Well, it's simple. Vinny, play this clip. Okay, let's try to navigate this. Ghetsis just fired a giant freeze cannon at a populated city. So let's talk about using a weapon of mass destruction. This plasma cannon, in a single shot, is able to freeze entire cities. It's pretty much a nuclear warhead. And is absolutely a weapon of mass destruction, and even owning it would put Ghetsis in the death penalty area. However, using it in and of itself is a completely different animal. That would be mass murder. Now, I know that the game tries to frame it as people being alive, but the whole town is covered in ice. These people would be frozen to death, dying from hypothermia. The general impact of the explosion would probably kill most people. There's no way that they're going to try to convince me that this isn't mass murder. And then finally, we have a charge in eco-terrorism resulting in death. Though the plasma cannon was aimed at the city, it froze nearby routes and definitely damaged nearby wildlife. And like I said before, there's no way you want to try to convince me that people didn't die from this plasma cannon being fired. That is another death penalty. Next up, like I said with Giovanni, though every evil team leader does try to fight you, Ghetsis pretty explicitly tries to kill you. I mean, Curum doesn't exactly shoot ice spikes into your face just for funsies. That would be life in jail. Next up is the DNA splicers. Yes, those little chopsticks that fuse Curum together, yeah, those are illegal. I mean, not that we have any real relevant technology in the real world. I mean, if we did, that'd be kind of awesome. Let me make a real world cat dog. Just, you know, plop one into that side, plop one into that side. Boom, awesome, cool fusion. But alas, we have to settle for the real world, and Ghetsis stealing these DNA splicers nets him in the real world about 20 years in prison for grand larceny. Next up, for using these DNA splicers. Curum is an animal in and of his own right, and he did not consent to being fused with another animal. This would net Ghetsis for his treatment of Curum, animal abuse for 180 days in jail, and unethical experimentation, which is 3 years in jail. Wow, these evil team leaders and their experimenting on Pokemon. I mean, Jesus Christ. And then finally, if you weren't tired of animal abuse, Ghetsis pretty explicitly is implied to abuse his team. After all, he's one of the only evil team leaders that has completely negative friendship with all of his Pokemon, including his Hydreigon, who uses frustration. It's more of a subtle narrative way of saying that Ghetsis treats his Pokemon horribly. I know that it's more up to our interpretation and not exactly fact, but it's pretty clear, which is 180 days in jail for my boy Ghetsis. Overall, that nets Ghetsis with a final tally of, drumroll please, 3 death penalties, 2 life sentences, 76 years in jail, and $25,000. Congratulations to our winner of Part 1. Yes, I said Part 1. If you haven't figured it out through the video, I am actually separating these Pokemon games half and half. I figured that this video was already going on long enough and it was already hell to research Ghetsis. I mean, just Jesus Christ, what an absolute menace. But don't worry, next video will be just as fun, trust me. And in the next video you have to look forward to Lysander, Guzma, Lucamine, Chairman Rose, Bolo, another attempted Omniside user, and more, so please be sure to look forward to that. Overall though, that's gonna do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing me ramble about, dear God, what is Ghetsis doing? Anyway guys, that's gonna do it for this video. I really appreciate you checking it out. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you appreciate this content, and do make sure to tune in. I will be trying to do episode 2 as soon as possible. Like I said, this video took a long time to research, so I really appreciate the love and support on this video. I have a lot more videos coming up, so please make sure to subscribe if you enjoy. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.